This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Alex White, Director General here at the Institute. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here. Those of you who are present in the room and joining us online, welcome. I know there's going to be a really interesting and stimulating discussion. So you'll be glad to hear you don't have to hear from me at all, other than just that word of welcome. And thanks in particular to our collaborators, if I may describe them as such, Johnson & Johnson, for their support for this event. It wouldn't have happened without them, and it's great to work with you as always on this occasion, indeed in the past, and I think this is the first of two events that we're doing, so we look forward to working closely with you. So as I say, my only happy task is to welcome you here and to hand over for a few words to Brita O'Reilly, who's Director of Market Access and Government Affairs, Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine Ireland. So welcome.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. On behalf of Johnson & Johnson, I want to warmly welcome the panellists, our distinguished guests, including the many guests who are joining us online this afternoon. At Johnson & Johnson, we're very proud of the role we play in Irish life. This includes our long-standing commitment to Ireland's economy and our contribution to public health through the development and provision of new medicines for patients. We're also very proud to partner with the Institute of International European Affairs. The IIEA is Ireland's leading forum for debate and discussion on public policy shaped by international perspectives. It provides an important platform for Irish and European experts to share insights, inform public debate, and shape vital policy decisions. Johnson & Johnson is therefore delighted to sponsor this discussion series on developing a life sciences vision for Ireland. This first event, with a focus on lessons from Europe and economic strategy, is particularly timely. In recent weeks, a new programme for government was agreed and includes a commitment to develop a national life sciences strategy to ensure that this important sector remains competitive and to ensure government adopts a coherent and ambitious approach to future opportunities. This is a very welcome commitment. Ireland can build upon its considerable strengths and successes in the life sciences sector, while also exploring examples of best practice from our European peers. With a holistic and coordinated approach, a new national strategy would open up opportunities for industry, for research and academia, for the health service, and for patients. This is an exciting prospect. We're delighted to facilitate this important discussion this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing from our distinguished speakers. Thank you.
I'm just delighted to... Is this working, as they say? Delighted to hand over to our chair for this afternoon, Brian Dobson. Doesn't need any introduction from any of you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to be here today for this. The first of what I gather will be two seminars looking at this issue. As we've been saying, in life, timing is everything. And the timing couldn't be better for this particular gathering because of the programme for government. Our old government with a new programme, and including for the first time this commitment in the lifetime of that government to put in place a life sciences strategy for Ireland. It's kind of extraordinary that it's taken this long when you look at the significance in terms of scale and value of the pharmaceutical and biotechnology sector in Ireland. I mean, I'm just looking over some of the figures. I think well in excess of 50% of our exports are accounted for by pharmaceuticals. It's a very significant employer and obviously makes a huge contribution to our corporation tax base. So in every regard, it's a vital now part of our economy. And I suppose it's grown up without anybody realizing its significance. We've 9 of the 10 top pharmaceutical companies are located here in Ireland. So Ireland really is a centre of life science. And now we're beginning to see actually that we have to remain nimble and innovative and creative if we want to sustain and grow that sector and for it to continue to make the contribution it makes to our economy and to our society. The topic specifically of today is lessons from Europe. So I'm very pleased to welcome as our guests here today, Jenny Nordberg, who's Director of International Affairs at LIF, which is the Association of Pharmaceutical Companies in Sweden. And Jenny, you're very welcome, and we're very pleased to be able to come here. Also, Diana Nielsen, who's CEO of the Danish Life Sciences Cluster. Now, she'll explain to you a little bit about what that is when we come to talk to her. We're also delighted to be joined by Professor Mark Ferguson, the former head of the Science Foundation Ireland, formerly the Chief Science Advisor to the government, also somebody with a background on the commercial side as well, and currently involved in progressing the Horizon Europe project for the European Union. But to begin the proceedings, I'm very glad to welcome, and again, we're very pleased to be joined today by Michael Lowen, CEO of IIEA Ireland. IIEA obviously are closely connected to the life sciences and pharmaceutical sector. It's been a big success story in terms of FDI, but there are obvious threats on the horizon in relation to its future. So if you like to put it all in context and to kick off our proceedings, I'm very pleased to invite and ask to come to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Michael Lowen, CEO of IIEA Ireland.
Thank you, Brian, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to be here today and to be part of this discussion, because I do think having open forums like this to have healthy discussions about policy, and particularly for economic policy, is so critically important. So delighted to be here. Maybe for the next 3 to 4 minutes or thereabouts, I might just share some thoughts with you and some context. So in IIEA Ireland, we've just come to the end of our current strategy just at December of last year. And, you know, that strategy was played out amidst a backdrop of near constant churn and change. You know, geopolitical tensions, technological challenge, response to the pandemic, indeed, the European crisis in energy. So across all of that, we've seen how the diversity and the range of companies that underpins our economic success have demonstrated exceptional agility and dynamism to make sure we stay at the front end. And by the end of that strategy, which I said had just come to conclusion, we have actually exceeded all of our targets or achieved all of our targets that we set out 5 years previous. But of course, we set out on that journey not knowing the times we were facing into, and it's no different than it is today. So what does that look like? From an FDI-based perspective, this year we just announced our annual results in December of last year. For the third year in succession, we are at the highest level of employment in the FDI base. 302,000 people are directly employed by FDI clients in this country. That accounts for approximately 11–12% of all employment in the state. And of course, its jobs are very important, and we see that in terms of the impact it has in regional locations, in the cluster, supporting the supply chain. And that's actually reflected in the expenditure of 38 billion from FDI companies in the Irish economy, in Irish materials, services, and indeed in salaries. But of course, beyond jobs and supply chain, we've also seen a transformation in the scale and scope of FDI activities in Ireland. And in some way, that probably has happened unknown and under the radar to most people. And maybe to put that in context for you, last year was our second highest record in terms of capital investment in the FDI base. 13.2 billion was invested in capital by FDI companies as recorded through the APSI survey. And also, I think it's an important point, and we'll probably come to this later, the future is bright, and the future is based on, why do I say that? It's based and illustrated that over the course of 2024, in IIEA, we supported a record number of R&D investments across our portfolio of client companies at 1.9 billion. So we are seeing the depth and quality of FDI as it lines to our economy. And of course, as I stand here, the life sciences sector has been central in that transformational journey. And to put it in context, and Brian shared some of that element with you, today the life sciences industry in Ireland is recognised as a global cluster in terms of the expertise we have here. And that spans manufacturing, research and innovation, global supply chain, global services. And when we look across our employment base, there is 100,000 people directly employed by FDI companies across the biopharma, pharma, and medical technologies industries. And they're actually bolstered with, I suppose, our indigenous base as well, that actually are very, I suppose, if we look at particularly, I think, in life sciences, it's a real strength in terms of the indigenous base we have in Ireland. And maybe just to take a moment to share maybe 1 or 2 examples. We had investments and announcements last year from Dexicom and Eli Lilly, both of whom actually, cumulatively over 1.3 billion in terms of capital investments. But the real issue is where they're focusing their solution in two big areas of diabetes and Alzheimer's. The impact of this sector in particular and what it means for society shouldn't be misunderstood or misrepresented. This is making real change to people's lives and indeed to many of our lives in this room today and listening online. And of course, we in IIEA are also very conscious of our role with the support of government and our parent department to enable the infrastructure for the industry to continue to look to the future. And what have we done to enable that? We've done two significant elements in terms of infrastructure. We've invested in the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Training, which is now over 10 years in existence, and we're joined by their CEO here today, Darren, as well. And the impact that has made in making sure that we have the right skills and capability to support the industry. And also in the last 2 years, through the support of our parent department, we've invested in digital manufacturing in Ireland, which again support that digital transition of our manufacturing base. So we make sure we focus on competitiveness and productivity, which are never more to the fore. But maybe as I look to the future and maybe to broaden the conversation from a national perspective to an EU level. To realise our future ambition for FDI and indeed in the life sciences sector, we need to ensure that national and EU operational environment is one in which companies can scale, can innovate and can succeed. At a national level, our value proposition is strong. We know that we have elements that we have to focus on within our own value proposition, and that is to address our cost competitiveness, to ensure an efficient planning process, to build infrastructure and capability, which includes water, wastewater, etc., to enhance our national talent and innovation ecosystem, critically important, and also in today's world, we have to make sure that we have response and incentivization to make that happen, whether you're an FDI company or an Indigenous company. And Ireland has long placed competitiveness, productivity and innovation at the centre of its enterprise policy. And we're starting to see some welcome shifts in a similar direction at the EU level. The EU acts as a key market, a source of international talent, and indeed regulation for clients across IDEA's portfolio. In our success, our challenges and our futures are absolutely interwound with that of the EU. As the EU seeks to respond to the shifting global landscape, the competitiveness compass set out by the Commission President in the last week builds on the proposals made by the Draghi report, with a core focus on innovation, decarbonisation, competitiveness, and increased security and resilience. We will have to wait to see, I suppose, the exact details of these various components of the competitive action plan in the weeks and months ahead. But certainly it's a welcome evolution. And from an life sciences perspective, particularly might just highlight one or two areas. Designing and implementing a balanced, transparent regulatory system that provides safety for citizens, certainty for firms, and ample opportunity to scope for innovation is absolutely critical. Also, involving supports for pan-European and global collaboration is critically important in the life sciences sectors. And in particular, I think the focus of IPCE's important projects of common European interest. This is an area which I believe Ireland and indeed Europe need to continue to strive for success. And similarly, we also need to support the twin transition to smarter and more sustainable manufacturing processes. And in this regard, I think applying the AI strategy, including in the competitiveness compass, is to be commended for its ambition to accelerate the use of AI in industry and in research, and the need to develop and support the twin transition. So in conclusion, what I'd like to maybe say is that while Ireland and indeed Europe has developed a coherent and life sciences strategy, needs to be based on highly innovative Indigenous companies, large multinational companies, and establishing a world-class research base. We will need to act to ensure enabling conditions nationally and in Europe to realise the next waves of opportunity in this life sciences sector and indeed beyond. And we have the momentum and the strong platform to build upon, provided we stand ready to match our ambition with action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. So come up here and take a seat. to say at the outset that we'll be broadening the conversation to all of you in the room and join us on Zoom in a little while when we've heard from the panel and had some discussion here. And to do that in the room, it's very simple. You put your hand up, and those of you who are joining us on Zoom can use the question and answer function, and I'll see you popping up here on my screen in front of me. I went looking for a definition of life sciences because I was anxious to try and establish what we're talking about here, and it's actually the Swedish life science strategy that I found a little definition, which I'll share briefly with you. It says the life sciences sector includes companies, higher education institutions, and public stakeholders at municipal, regional, and state level whose activities contribute to promoting human health. The sector comprises research, higher education, and innovation, the development of pharmaceuticals, medical devices and treatments, as well as prevention, implementation, and monitoring. So this is a wide agenda. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to talk about. And as I say, we're particularly pleased that we have a European perspective here as part of our discussion. And I'd like to start with you, if I might, Diana, because I think just recently the Danish authorities published their updated life science strategy. Is that right? So we're now setting out on having our own first life sciences strategy. Yes. So tell us a bit about the Danish experience, what lessons you've learned, what lessons that you've applied to now updated strategy, and what we might learn from the Danish experience.
Thank you for inviting me, and I will. Is the sound on? Yeah. So I'm from the Danish Life Science Cluster. It's a national cluster that is a membership-based business model. The Danish Life Science Strategy work started back in 2000, and it has been in progress for, I think it took at least 10 years till we actually got the first life science strategy. The first strategy focused a lot on the framework conditions around having the collaboration between industry and academia and the public sector, of course. And now the third version of it is pretty much based on the same ideals, but has a more global outlook, you could say. So the work we have done from the first strategy to the last has been very focused on how do you create these enabling institutions that can actually implement. Strategy is just an intention until somebody does something. Sure. So having the actors and the whole ecosystem walking in the same direction, using the process as a driver for creating the strategy has been very crucial for us. So the second version of the life science strategy actually included a merger of the cluster that was built locally or regionally. We have 5 regions in Denmark. So they were asked to merge into the cluster that now is the Danish Life Science Cluster. The reason for that is that the market is so small and fragmented, and the public sector is also very hard to access. So having a broader, more common national view on the growth layer in the sector, it was crucial. So that was created while the second strategy was launched. And now the third is focusing very much on what we can do in Europe and how we can think more globally around the life science industry. So the sector has doubled since we started the strategy development. So it's the growth journey has been crazy, and the need for talent and the need for collaboration is even more bigger than it was back then. And the Danish industry is, even though we have some great players also on the global scene, it's a very tight community. And you could say the strength position we have with that is that everyone knows each other, or it is easy to collaborate because of that. But the incentives are not maybe there that much to do it. So that we still have the silos, and we have to fight the silos constantly to create the partnerships and the public-private understandings. And especially to the public market as the procurement models demand new technologies and new solutions, we need to access the public scenery for the industry and the work that I do, so that it's easier for them to require innovation. And in the latest strategy, it has now been declared that the public health task also include innovation. This is very huge in Denmark because it has now been embedded in the public health reform, that it's now a job that they have to do in the sector to drive innovation, lead innovation, and procure it. So this is, it's of course making it easier for industry to do this collaboration, but also getting it ready. It's also easy to look at the big players in this game when you look at innovation and driving the investments. And I will just recommend that you don't forget the small SMEs. And I think the cross-disciplinary potential that you talked about is very much there in AI, in tech. And what brings the sector together and all the different the stakeholders you just mentioned is data. Access to data as a source of innovation. It's both needed in biotech, but it's also, of course, needed in health tech and driving the transformation in the public sector.
These clusters, just a word about those. Who's in the cluster and how close is their level of cooperation?
There's one cluster now.
One cluster now, okay.
And that's the one that I lead. We have all the universities of Denmark, all the educational institutions training the next level of healthcare workers. And we have all the municipalities, all the regions, and all the industry associations and the membership organizations themselves. So it's the whole family. And it's the reason why we created this neutral platform is to create that space where you can discuss innovation openly, that you're not in negotiation, and you're not talking about specific trades. You're talking about the potential that we all have by collecting our forces and looking at the global market.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I suspect there might be some questions about that. We'll maybe come back to it in the course of our discussion. Mark, your current role is rapporteur and lead author of the European Commission High-Level Group on Research and Innovation. So talk to us a little bit about, and Michael touched on it here, about aligning, if you like, our life sciences sector with what's happening in Europe. How important is that going to be for our future, the future of our industry here, and what sort of shape do you think it's going to take?
Very good. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to participate. So the recommendations for the next framework program, Next Horizon program, which we hope will be about 200 billion from the Commission, were recently published. That's what you talked about. This is the report. It's called Align, Act and Accelerate. It's a take on the finance. It's a AAA report. And it talks about research, technology and innovation for European competitiveness. The starting point for this is to ask a very simple question, and that is, what can you do at European level better than you can do at national level? And the answer to that is at least threefold. So the first is multinational, multi-actor collaboration. So most countries can do a bilateral collaboration easily. A few countries can do trilateral collaborations, but rarely more than that. So the European Union, par excellence around the world, does multinational, multi-actor, meaning industry, academia, and so on, collaborations. The second is competition at a European level. So if you're looking at a competition nationally in Ireland or in Denmark or anywhere, that's within a certain boundaries. At Europe, the competition's across the whole of Europe. So it's competitive excellence. That's the second thing that we can do better, simply because. And the third thing that we can do better is projects of scale where it may be beyond the means of any individual country. So that could be an investment in a big piece of kit. It could be data, where you need to collect data across. It could be some kind of repository, whether it's a genome or what have you. So those three kind of guiding principles focus on where you get added European value. Because if we want to invest more in research and innovation, I don't know any government in Europe that wants to spend more money by way of a subscription to the EU. They'd rather spend it themselves, and actually they'd rather not spend it at all, because it means you can cut taxes. So you have to show added value beyond the national value. To life sciences, it is called out here. It's a very strong sector within Europe. If you look at the data, about 40% of the projects at the European Research Council, which is the premier body for funding fundamental blue skies research, they are in the life sciences sector. 50% of the projects at the European Innovation Council, which is about translating cutting edge research into deep tech industries, that's in the life sciences sector. We have very strong indigenous industries, Novo Nordisk, Siemens, and so on. We have very strong charities, the Novo Nordisk Foundation, the Wellcome Trust in the UK. So this is a good basis for Europe, the life sciences. It's also a good basis for collaboration with the United States. You have many multinational companies, J&J among them, in Europe, and medical life sciences is very strong in the US. It's also very strong in the UK, our nearest neighbour, and it's also strong in Northern Ireland. So in an Irish context, we should be thinking not only about Europe, but what could we do with Northern Ireland? And one example, if you look at the research strengths in Northern Ireland, then Momentum 1.0, which is run out of Queen's University Belfast, is the intersection between artificial intelligence, wireless technology, and Internet of Things. So it's all about artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, wireless technology. Very important for medical devices, very important for pharma, very important for health data. It's probably one of the leading clusters in the world. Why do I say that? They just won a 250 million contract from the UK to look at the influence of artificial intelligence on GCHQ, the National Intelligence Agency. That's a kind of mark of standing. So we should be thinking in a broad context in Ireland about what we can do for the indigenous sector, for the startups, for the research, what we can do for collaboration with large companies, what we can do in terms of collaboration with our European neighbours and the European programmes, what we can do with the UK, which isn't part of the European Union, and Northern Ireland's kind of part of the European Union and kind of not part of the European Union. But it's part of the island of Ireland. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I can say something about that later on, but for me, one of the key recommendations in here is about an experimental unit. And an experimental unit means we're going to do some things very differently. And we're going to give people the power to experiment. That word is chosen very carefully because you don't always know how an experiment is going to work. Most experiments do not work the way you expect. Some go better, some don't. And that's okay. But we need to do a few things differently. And we need to give people permission to do those things differently. And we need not to be obsessed when they actually don't work out as well as you hoped they would. And you need to celebrate and build on when they work out better than you thought they would. And those experimental units can be in areas like procurement. So procurement is probably the biggest tool we can use to focus innovations, the one that's least used. I will point out that the Commission has started pre-commercial procurement in the life sciences sector. Defence has done that as well. So being experimental, and I'll shut up at that, and I'll give you some outlandish ideas as to how you can be experimental later on.
About the quote from Samuel Beckett, fail again, fail better.
Exactly.
There's a bit of that,
exactly.
Yeah. Jenny, as I said, you're head of the, or you're international director of LIF, which is the industry association in Sweden. But previously you worked for the Swedish government and you were involved in setting up, do I understand correctly, the Office for Life Sciences in Sweden. Is that right? Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And more broadly, what has been the Swedish strategy in terms of the life sciences sector?
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's really exciting to be here and to be able to get input also to the Irish work. And yes, I was the former national coordinator for life sciences. I was the third in the row. And I was tasked to set up an office for life sciences and then work out a national strategy for life sciences. And we've had the national strategy now for 5 years. But the Office for Life Sciences, that was sort of the start. And that is a within government cross-ministry organization. I think that is key. Really, coordination within life sciences is key. That's why you need a strategy. You need a strategy to be able to have something to coordinate around. But also, so the Office for Life Sciences have staff members who are also working in the Ministry of Social Affairs, in the Ministry of Research and Education, and in the Ministry of Climate and Business. That's how it's set up now. And also, of course, work a lot with foreign trade and work with the other ministries as well. But that's sort of the core organization. I know that UK has the similar, and we set it up to be similar to the Office for Life Sciences in the UK. And that was sort of the first step. And our second step is really to have the outreach dialogue. We don't have one region in Sweden. We have 21 regions. Although we have a vast country, but we're not that many people. We're 10 million people. So we have 21 healthcare regions, a lot of very strong and very good life sciences clusters there. So our task was then also to have a dialogue with every one of them, basically. We have an advisory board to the Office for Life Sciences, to the strategy, and to the government as in a whole, the advisory board on life sciences. I'm on the board committee now. And that is also not only to give the advice to the government, but also to take action. So a lot of our national strategy is, it's around 8 priority areas. Those are the same now. We just have a new version of the strategy. But the importance is not only for the government to be able to take action, but also for us, all the other actors in the ecosystem that you alluded to, also to be able to take action, because we can only sort of look at the strategy and sort of point out, you can work on the regulation, but the government can work on the regulation and the incentives and the funding, but we have to do the rest of the work. So I think that some of the great outcomes, and that's now been very good updates in the new strategy, is also more on the internationalization, European collaboration, Nordic collaboration, and also collaboration with small smart nations. I think that we should all team up a lot more. That's a very good way going forward. A lot of focus also on better regulation, more focus, and also outlines towards working more effectively on attracting clinical trials and sort of turning that trend also in Sweden. We've had some great investments on public-private partnerships. So our challenges, though, is still to accelerate and to be that. We're saying we proud ourselves to be a superpower in innovation, and we are from Sweden, but we need to accelerate much more. We have and the Nordics as a whole, we have a unique pool of health data. It's really unique. If we used it, it would be even better. So that's and that's to be able to have a sustainable secondary use around that. That's we could really be that sort of working from the AAA guidelines here and the way going forward. So I think that that's sort of the challenge, to be able to take the next leap, to be able to accelerate. And I think that that's where we need to go now, because the competitiveness agenda that we have in Sweden, that we have in Europe, it's really important for us to take sort of leadership and action in that direction.
It's very interesting, Michael, listening to Diana and to Jenny, isn't it? The experience in these two Nordic countries, the level of cooperation in slightly different models, but the general principle is the same, is that all the various stakeholders are coming together. It's one thing to have a strategy, and if it just sits on a shelf, it makes no difference. But to implement that, what is the level of cooperation at the moment between stakeholders in the sector here? Is there scope for more? What would you like to see?
So I think it's great to hear the examples, and maybe if we think about just from an Irish perspective, I would say that we have great levels of cooperation and support, and actually I think today represents a part of that, and maybe just to pay compliments to the I suppose the ecosystem with the clients, and for J&J for sponsoring this event today, for all of your peers, for the academic industries that support it. But we need to do more, and that's the reality. I think we have a very strong network here in Ireland, and if we look at, I think that's where it's so important, and why it's central in the programme for government, that the life sciences strategy has been called out. It's a recognition of the importance of the sector, number one. It's the recognition is that we have done a lot of things right. We've built an ecosystem here that supports large companies, small companies, startups. We have a cluster in medical technologies, for example, that's probably number 2 or 3 in the world in terms of scale and in terms of innovation. But we need to advance that, because the one thing we know about every strategy is, and just to say, like in less than 2 weeks' time, we're going to be launching our new strategy, and I can guarantee you it won't sit on the shelf. It will be actioned, and what that means is effectively that we need to look at what the next level of that collaboration looks like, and I mentioned in my opening remarks regarding R&D, we actually see that as the path. The path is actually about innovation and about data. How do we actually get more of that to happen? And we've done a number of good things in Ireland. You know, as you think about the innovation fund that we put for the DTIF funds, you know, this Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, that was very much focused about getting cross collaboration across sectors. And it was the components was you must have a startup or an indigenous, you must have a multinational, you must have someone from the academic world. So in some ways, it was creating that environment to bring everyone together. We need to do more of that. And I think that's what the new strategy will help us do.
This Danish, the mandating of the health service, as I understood you to say, to support and promote medical innovation. That's a very interesting idea, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's an idea we need to be conscious of. And when we look to our new life sciences strategy, what's very core in all of what you've said here is it's not one sector of or one segment of government actually driving it. It's all segments of government. And this needs to be a whole of government. And that's where I would take, I suppose, I would take solace from the fact that this is key to our programme for government, and therefore it's a responsibility of all of government to deliver. Undoubtedly, you know, someone has to hold the pen in terms of writing it and implementing it, but it is a responsibility of all of government.
Yeah. So Dan, do you want to comment on that?
No, I just want to add to the fact that when we started out with the strategy in Denmark in 2000, the goal was to get a ministry focusing on life science, and we ended up getting a life science office like they have in Sweden across different ministries, and now we have 4 ministers signing the strategy, which is a good point that you get the cross collaboration across ministries. And the latest process of developing the strategy version of number 3, we created a life science council that actually did the recommendation where you had industry, because I don't believe that many want to write a strategy that is not getting implemented, but it sort of happens all the time anyways. So I think having that, driving the resources that are out there, we're keeping in mind that 2/3 of our research and development investments within life science are private, but still the public's politics are not including that in the directions. So if we want them to feel that they own the strategy in the industry as well as academia and the public sector, we need to come together to develop it. So having a process where you kind of allow these discussions to happen, to get that ownership and get those insights in there, so that they become this common pool that you can take the decisions out from. I think it has been a key for the strong ownership that we now have as a guidance. The Life Science Council is still there, and it's put in the strategy as a part of monitoring the process and how well are we doing. But they are all leaning in, giving in funding, giving in knowledge on the analysis that we need to push the country forward.
Jenny, what's the story in Sweden in terms of workforce development, the level of collaboration between third-level institutions, universities, and industry? What's happening there?
There's a lot of collaboration going on. I think that there is more that's needed to be done there also. I mean, there's always the big debate of sort of we don't have enough workforce in healthcare. How can we sort of pick that up? We don't have the sort of the head of the game workforce in the industry that we need to attract. And we are, so of course, both the competitiveness is built on the competences and the attractiveness. So that's a natural part of the strategy, of course. But that's why we're so reliant on the investment from the research and innovation bill, because this is sort of the long-term strategy that also binds together with the new framework program for Europe. But I think that's sort of a key challenge that we're not, that I think there's more that's needed, more needs to come also in that respect, because we need to work in totally new ways and to sort of adapt all the new techniques and technologies.
Yeah, of course, in all of this, the appetite for capital, for investment is enormous, isn't it? I mean, it's,
and it's totally needed. And even in a country like Sweden, we're totally dependent on our exports. We have many export sectors. but still the life sciences sector is our second or third export sector every year, and that's after automotive and forestry, and that's not maybe what you think about in Sweden, and that attracts investments. And we've been able to attract investment, we've been able to scale, but if we are going to do that in the next coming 10 or 20 years, we need to sort of rethink the system, and that's sort of, we need to see that life sciences and pharmaceuticals is really a business case for Europe, for Sweden, for Ireland, and a business case both for innovation and implementation at one go. So that's sort of my key advice to my own government, and my key advice here is not to separate implementation and innovation, but look at that that's sort of a joint part.
Yeah, I mean the question about funding innovation and experimentation, and you talked about experiments rarely producing the results maybe that you expected, but that all takes big levels, big amounts of investment. Now, where is Europe going to find those resources?
So I think we need to be clear that the public markets cannot do this on their own. We need to mobilize more private sector investment, and the biggest opportunity for Europe is pension funds. So the amount of venture capital that is deployed in Europe is 1/10 of that is deployed in the United States, 1/10. And where does most of the venture capital money from the US come from? It comes largely from pension funds. So if you look at the largest deep tech investor in Europe, it's the European Innovation Council, and then it's Bpifrance, which is the national bank, and then it's like the California Teachers Fund. So the California Teachers Pension Fund owns more equity than the German or the Irish or the French or any in the Netherlands put together. Okay.
Right.
So most US pension funds will dedicate between 1% and 5% of their income to venture capital. In Europe, it's 0.01%. And that is a legacy of, quote, risk, unquote. But actually, they're not really risky investments because it's a portfolio approach. So we need to mobilize more capital, particularly from the private sector, and particularly into those venture funds. I mean, the European Innovation Council has been successful in doing that in a small space of time. The EIC invests about $1 billion a year. And for that, it leverages $4 billion from the private sector. So it's about de-risking. When you think about that, the difference between a high risk and a stupid risk is actually quite small. Right? So if you think about the difference between a high risk and a stupid risk, and in my book, the difference between a high risk and a stupid risk is, will somebody else take the risk with you? Because if nobody else will take the risk with you, then it's probably tending towards a stupid risk. If you think you're the only person in the world who thinks this is such a fantastic opportunity, you want to invest in it, you kind of have to have a question mark over that. So the EIC mandates that we have co-investment. So every €1 invested takes €4 currently from the private sector. That's really important because the European disease, apart from not taking enough risk, is also underinvesting. A company needs 30 million and the European investors will say, will 10 million do? Well, the answer is it won't. In today's world, if you need 30 million, you need 30 million. If you need 100 million, you need 100 million. It is getting better. Companies this year have done 100 million Series A rounds in Europe, which was unheard of before, very common in the US. So I think a major source is the private sector. And secondly, I think government needs to be adventurous in what it does. So if you look at challenge-based funding, which is sort of flavor du jour in the economic, in the innovation world, where you set a challenge and you get people to look at that. In most cases, the prize is money. Anybody can give money. The biggest prize a government or the European Commission can give is either a change in the regulation, an order, meaning ordering a certain amount of product, or a permission to do something. So we should be thinking about challenges. Here's an idea for the life sciences. If a multinational company in Ireland or Sweden or Denmark has a particular problem, articulate what that challenge is, throw it out to the small and medium enterprise sector and the academic sector, have some of the funding agencies fund some of that. And then the prize is that the large company buys a solution. Basically says, we want it, we'll implement this. That's much better than a prize if you're a small company. It's an order, it's validation, you get working with the customer and so on. So I think we need to be clever about that. And I'll finish. If you think some of that is kind of pie in the sky, then look what our competitors are doing. So one of the most innovative agencies in the world is DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Agency in the United States. So last September, they put out a call in quantum computing. Quantum computing is going to be very important, particularly for the life sciences sector. And they basically said, we don't believe that anyone in the world can build a quantum computer that can crack all of the current encryption codes by the year 2030. But we're prepared to entertain the hypothesis that there is somebody. So anybody in the world can apply for this, right? It's an American fund. Anybody in the world can apply for this. We will have a very short evaluation period. I can go into the details. But the prize is if we think you can build that quantum computer by the year 2030, we will invest $300 million in a single project. That's a hell of a prize. If you're a small company, somebody giving you, we're not taking 300 million and dividing up across a whole bunch of companies and countries in Europe. We're not taking 300 million and dividing up a bunch of companies. We're giving it to one company. And there's an evaluation criteria. So that's what the competition's doing. They're going to see every piece of technology in the Western world going to be subject to US export control, which is interesting. And they're going to be looking forward. We need to be thinking like that.
So then that brings me, Michael, if I might, to we've a great success story in pharmaceutical investment here, but it's an FDI. It's a foreign direct investment success story by and large. So what about that, the potential of that cluster? As I said, 9 of the 10 top pharmaceutical companies in the world, be providing the impetus for the growth of our own innovative pharmaceutical and life sciences sector.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the life sciences sector in Ireland, as I mentioned, you're correct at one level. And the pharma side is predominantly dominated by foreign direct investment. But on the medical device side, actually, I would argue that actually our indigenous base is equally as strong as our multinational base. And that's really important because we've made that. And I think we should recognize that because the innovation that's happening within the sector, and especially because I've been involved in the sector maybe for the last decade in particular, it's a very different sector today than it was 5 years ago or was 10 years ago. And to give you maybe some examples of that, if you look at the level of product innovation and R&D that's happening within pharma in particular, R&D medical device, like they are, without a shadow of a doubt, to my mind, the sectors that have been driving our innovation agenda for the last decade. And they've been doing that in terms of new products, in terms of new processes, in a highly regulated industry. And we've seen the value of that. We've seen the value in terms of, and we can talk about jobs or we can talk about capital, but really where we're seeing the value is when you go in and see the product and the services that are now being developed, managed and delivered from Ireland. Also, I think a byproduct of that is we have global leaders have been developed in Ireland across these areas of innovation and research, and really strong collaborations with our university sector and partnerships, embedded supply chains and innovation chains with local companies. So there is a lot happening there, but I think to Mark's earlier point, we have to make sure that we are ambitious enough to put the prize and to incentivize companies to collaborate more together, because there is more to be achieved together than there is separately. And that is, I think that's the reality. And we've been talking about this for the last number of years. And particularly you can look at, they just talked about data earlier. Like, in fairness, if you look at data, in order for life sciences companies, you can try and build your own data expertise, but actually those that are partnering with technology companies are the ones that's driving ahead and doing those partnerships. How you apply it then actually is the win-win, because the life sciences company gets a win, the technology company gets a win, the startup gets a win. So there's benefits in all of that. So I think collaboration is certainly the way forward.
Before I go to the room and the online audience, just a word, maybe Diana, talk to us a little bit about emerging trends. What's coming down the track? AI, we're all talking about that. Personalized medicine. Yeah.
Well, I just want to build a little bit on the talk here, because I think we don't just have a public sector. There's a little bit of risk averse. This industry, I might say, not offending anyone, that it's also a bit risk-averse industry, the pharmaceutical industry. And if we are to bend or lean into these emerging trends, we are to be more risk-willing and experimental across public-private investments. And I think what we see in the structural part of innovation, one of the emerging trends is to invest in health, that it's not looked at just as disease curing or caring, but it's really preventing and early detection and having the citizens build capacity to be engaging in their own health more on a larger scale than we've seen today through data, through technologies, and through personalized designed solutions. And we are going to require that as citizens, but also, but also as patients, and health management, where we see chronic disease management, where you live with the disease. You don't define yourself as sick, but you live with it and you manage it because it's a part of your daily life. And the solutions for that with wearables, we've seen them already, but they are going to be even smarter with the AI. They're going to be our new GPSs on health. They're going to shape predicting what kind of disease are going to hit us. And we're going to be able to plan ahead with our pension solutions and our health insurances companies. And I think there's going to be emerging trends where the public sector will not be able to deliver the care that we're expecting. So we are going to be able to buy some of these healthcare services from a broader service providers than we see today. And in one of the programs we do in the cluster, it's called Lighthouse Life Science. We collaborated with pension funds and the industry looking at health as an investment, saying, okay, we're not just talking about productivity being how we can invest in technology, but also how can we invest in the future health of our staff and employees? And this, who has the incentive to do that? I hear so many public speakers that want to invest in prevention, but I don't see the budgets. So who's going to do it? And the pension funds and the insurance companies, they have the incentives to do it because it's going to cost them. And we'll see the workforces as a part of even the industry's investments in themselves because they're going to lack talent. They're going to be interested in this agenda. So thinking in a different way of the whole market of health will also, I think, provide more openness to this more experimental approach to innovation, leaning into new technologies. Quantum is going to be one of them, personalized medicine, of course, but the individualized focusing on data is going to beat them all.
Okay, let me take some questions or comments from the room, and as I say, I have some comments on my machine here. Maybe I'll kick off with that while you gather your thoughts. Excuse me. Kieran McKinley says, can we take a leaf from the biopharma sector collaboration with IIEA on the formation of the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Training in developing Ireland as an AI centre of excellence in delivering patient care? Comment on that? Yeah, you'd say yes, I guess, would you?
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit biased in that, so I would say yeah. But you're correct. I think we have to, the success, if I'm honest, to talk about NIBRD is the fact that we were very clear on what our outcome was, and we stayed committed to it, and we funded it. And we got partners to work with us. And if you're going to, no matter what we're going to do in the future, we have to make sure we do get those ingredients right. Be clear on what we're setting out, be clear on the partners, and everyone contributes, and then measure success. And I think we can do that. And that's hopefully what our new life science and strategy would set forward.
Okay, who'd like to come in from the floor? Yes, a lady here. And you might tell us your name and maybe if you're from an organization or what your connection is. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pearl McDermott. I'm Director of DCU Life Sciences Institute. So I just wanted to ask the panel, as Ireland formulates our national strategy in life sciences, and you talked about innovative thinking and new ideas, how do we ensure that we're listening to all the voices we should be listening to instead of the same strong old way of thinking voices, for want of a better term? And also to mention, you talk a lot about innovation and talent. And I don't think anybody in the room would disagree. A lot of the talent and the training and the innovative ideas are actually coming from universities. We're the ones producing the graduates at level 8, 9, and 10. So not just PhD level, but all of the honours degrees. They are being fed from the universities in. So our voice, of course, is important, but it's just in the Life Sciences Institute, we've just gone through our own strategy, and it was interesting, Mark, to hear you say the challenge-based. That's what we're going with, and we want to identify problems that industry and other actors have and build projects around that. So I'm delighted to hear you mention that. But I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that to make sure, as we're building our strategy, I'm very keen to get the voices you don't normally hear.
Right. Have you any particular voices in mind for the loud old ones?
I'm not saying another word on that.
Okay, anyone who want to pick up that? Yes, Jenny, you want to come in?
Yes, to share some of the experiences of what we did as we started up the Office for Life Sciences. 3 months later, we set out a sort of a call for invites. So we presented a roadmap for the strategy, and it was a call for evidence. You know, like the European Commission is working along, like they will do now with the European Life Sciences strategy. I think that is one thing. What I would have liked to see much more is voices from outside of the ecosystem from life sciences. I mean, this is the times of super convergence, and we need to build much more from the other parts of society, other parts of the industry sector. That's one thing that I would have liked to see more, and I would have liked to have sort of a follow-up loop, because a follow-up loop can also ask questions. I mean, who do we talk to? Who do we interact with? Who's part of the implementation here? Are there parts missing? I would like to see that. So that would be sort of one of the key things that I now want to import to the Swedish work.
Oh, yeah, widening the conversation. Yeah, yeah.
I will say these voices. I've worked many years in the public sector as well with policymaking, and I don't see those voices being very interested in joining that conversation, to be honest. So having the cluster shape the space where you get these voices and the focus on action, really, because the focus on the students and the labs environments that we have in Denmark with the universities, they are so action oriented. And their time frame is just 1 year. Let's do it, and let's create the spaces for that to happen, so we don't wear them out in long policy making processes. Because I don't really see the value creation in it.
All right, I'll take another comment from the floor. It's the gentleman here.
Thank you so much, and this afternoon's session has been so interesting. So thanks a million to J&J and the Institute for organising. I'm Ono Phelan from the Irish MedTech Group in IBEC, and I have a bit of a question maybe for Anna and for Jenny particularly. I think it was interesting that you emphasised the importance of the office and the sort of the kernel around which everything is built. Could I ask you, maybe we're all aware of, I suppose, restrictions on, you know, in terms of resources in the public sector. Did you get everything you needed in the beginning in terms of asking the government to fund your office, or did you find you had to build it incrementally as you went? And were there key messages that sort of enabled you to achieve your vision? Thank you.
Which of you would like to pick that one up? Yep.
Yes, so did we get what we wanted or even needed? No, of course not, from the start. So the Office for Life Sciences from the start was 6 people, was the coordinator, and then 2 people at each ministry. What I do think was really key, and what I still think is sort of the unique way of the Swedish way of working, is that there is an organization. There are people meeting on a daily basis from all the ministries. It's not that you take this, and you take that, and then we follow up half a year later. So I think that we got that, but that was hard. That was so much more that was needed than money. That was cultural work, and that's sort of ongoing. And so you have to sort of build on that culture work. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, somewhat the same.
But I would also say that I would not expect the funding for an office like that to be the driver of it. I think what they did in the process of creating the Life Science Council was to pool even more resources from the private industry in the strategy making. Because when the council came together and asked, so what are the data that we're going to talk out from? And they were, oh, we don't have the budget for that. Okay, let's create it. And then they pulled some extra funding for creating that new groundwork that we needed to build on in the strategy making. So I think that is a key learning from our experience, not to close around the Office of Life Science and say, oh, the Secretariat in the public sector is going to fund everything. It's not. It can coordinate, it can culture create, but it cannot lead the innovation and the strategy making in the long run anyway.
I'll come to you now. There's a question just while we're with Diana and Jenny. How are you measuring the success of your strategy and your policy formation? What are this is from Alana Carthy. What are the defined KPIs, the key performance indicators? Yeah.
Well, I can't remember, to be honest, on, but there are KPIs on all the topics. So some of them are focused on the ranking that we are going to have as a country, and some of them are activities that they just have to fulfill. So, but I would say the strategy, it kind of, besides the Life Science Council is going to try to lead all the different activities, there are budget posts for each of them, and you would say some of the things that got funding have a higher success rate of actually having the muscles to be happening.
Yeah.
But some of these KPIs are focused on legislation, and it is a bit of a cultural change as well as a collaboration with the EU and the partners there, because you cannot do that at a national level alone. So they are differentiating a little bit, but the life science strategy in Denmark is translated into English. So you're welcome to.
All right. And in Sweden, Jenny, how do you measure your success?
Well, from the Life Sciences Council in Sweden, we're looking at the Danish. They are doing this very well. I think that the Swedish life sciences strategy needs this much more. We need the KPIs to follow it up. Our innovation agency, Vinnova, a counterpart to the Enterprise Island, has a mission to follow up sort of the development of the sector and showcase the sector. And what the government does is, of course, to always highlight all the initiatives that the government does. And we have on the regional side a lot of regional strategy or strategic actions toward the life sciences strategy. There's an annual conference that was just last week that's online, and it's in Swedish, but you can follow. So there are plenty of parts, but we need the KPIs and we need that to work. So that's I'm working on that in the council. Please come with me to Sweden and sort of to push for that a bit.
Plenty of collaboration here today. Yes, a gentleman down here.
Kevin Walsh, I'm with Roche. Really fantastic discussion today. I suppose we've spoken about what works well at a national level and then what works even better at an EU level. So in that vein, how do you think a national life science strategy for Ireland could complement a future EU life science strategy? To no one in particular, but perhaps
maybe Mark, you pick it up there.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So let's just take a few simple examples, and that is like databases. Small countries like Ireland need to pool their information with other countries. Okay, so at a European level, what can we do to look at that? And if you look at health data, it's probably things that citizens are really sensitive about. Oops, that's probably me. They're worried about the security of that, the cyber security of it. They're worried about it getting, and the most common statement you will find is, I don't want my health insurance company to know about this. But that probably requires some innovation on how we do policies, because if you're going to be sick and die early, I probably don't want to sell you a health insurance or life insurance policy, but I'd love to sell you a pension because you won't collect it. So you know, combining pension and health insurance kind of balances out a lot of risk in people's minds about how you. So we need to be innovative in how we deliver things to citizens to allow them to allow the greater citizenry to share their data. Because if you're the only person in the world who knows your health data, i.e. your genomic data, your proteomic data, whatever, it's of no use to you. The only way it's of use to you is to be able to compare it to a bigger, wider data set. So I think the first thing between national and European is these larger data sets and finding a way that people get comfortable sharing what is extremely sensitive information for some people, and thinking about how that relates to both the security, the cybersecurity, and also how it relates to, you know, things that impact them into their day-to-day lives. Then the second thing is to collaborate in big stuff. So, you know, I'm really impressed with the Danish quantum foundry. So for those of you who don't know, quantum computing will massively change a lot of sectors, including the life sciences sector. The collaboration with Novo Nordisk and the University of Copenhagen, it's, I don't know, what is it, €1 billion or something, in a quantum foundry focused on quantum computing for healthcare. Like, there is no way in the world that we could replicate that in Ireland, nor should we. We should be collaborating. We should say, here is a European Centre of Excellence in quantum for life sciences. We are going to have a national strategy that talks about training people or sending people there or working with them. We're not going to build it ourselves because it's €1 billion investment. So thinking about how we strategically position in those things is really important. And that's how I think you can dovetail the two.
Take a comment from the gentleman here.
Thank you. Very good presentations. Brian Daly is my name. I'm a member of the Institute. 2 questions, if I could. I'd just be interested, did the Danish program and strategy lead in any way directly to Novo Nordisk's success? In other words, is that a KPI, or is the outcome that you got with Novo Nordisk, is that as a result of the strategy, or was it not as a result of the strategy? And secondly, talking about external voices, there's a lot of disruptive external voices in the US around the pharma sector. And I'd just be interested in your views as to whether you think they will feed into any of your thinking around your own strategies.
Okay. So the Nordisk, the Danish story?
I think it will be taking too much of the honor of Novo Nordisk. Great work. I think the strategy have been, of course, been led by a lot of the pharmaceutical industry stakeholders. So, of course, they have been pushing on the framework conditions, the recruiting of talent, how to create the next level of education. So you have the whole ecosystem ready for the growth going on. And of course, a lot of the collaboration or the success of Novo Nordisk is due to public-private collaborations. It could not have happened otherwise. So if you ask them, they will say that it's a part of a big ecosystem movement. But I'd say that looking at the smart, focused investment plan that they've had, and there's a lot of that we cannot take an honor for as a country, to be honest, right? But I would say that on the longer term, getting to the next level of growth. Last year, Novo Nordisk hired 6,000 employees. It's crushing our ecosystem locally to have that high success on one stakeholder. And our friends in Finland had one big company, you remember? So having that big whale, how do you handle that as an ecosystem? Don't sleep and lean back on that. Really, you have to keep up the pace to make sure that all the other stakeholders in the ecosystem will also be following up on that success so that we do not drown in it.
All right. And the disruptive voices, you're not thinking of the new health secretary in Washington, are you, by any chance? I mean, maybe a comment on that from yourself, Michael, because there's a wider context to all this as well. You know, what's going on in the US, what might be happening in terms of the international trade environment. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so you're correct. So there is a lot of noise. I think there's a lot of voices. And yes, we have to, like, we're hearing them. I think we're all hearing them. But I think we also have to reflect on what we can do. And that's so important because from an IDA perspective and an Ireland perspective, we need to focus on where our strengths are in this sector and indeed in other sectors, because we have real strengths and we're bringing real value to that ecosystem, whether it's across Europe. And I think there's a lot more we can do in Europe if we think about the focus in Europe on healthcare, on semiconductor, as well, on quantum. They're all areas where actually Ireland can actually bring more to the European table and more to the European offering, and the same across the globe. So we're certainly very, very conscious in that. And you will actually, in the next 10 days or so, I'll have the privilege with our minister to launch our new strategy for IDA, and you'll actually see where our vision is in the future. And we're very much looking to that ambition to the future, because you know, today's news is today. We're really talking about what the future looks like and how we get prepared for that as well.
Right. Sit down the front here, first of all, and then I'll go to the back. Thank you.
Thank you, Fergus from J&J. Just on that, in terms of a focus on what we can actually deliver here in Ireland, one of the areas where I suppose health technologies, industry, research, clinicians, all of that converges is in healthcare delivery. And I know that in the UK and other countries, one of the core themes of these national strategies has been, for instance, in the UK strategy, NHS collaboration. That's been a core pillar of the approach in terms of strengthening the ecosystem. From the Danish and Swedish experience, based on your experience rolling out strategies and implementing them, are there areas for collaboration with the health service that you would suggest are good starting points or good areas to prioritize for a country that's starting to develop this holistic approach?
Yeah. Do you want to pick on that one then, Diana? And then Jenny?
I would say, of course, clinical trials and test platforms for quick tests. Sometimes we deep dive too much into the research area when it comes to testing technology. It's too far. You need faster trial sceneries. So having these living labs or whatever you'd call them, with professional staff that know how to progress tests that are documented in a way where it becomes commercialized easily. And then business models, access to data to understand how the procurement or the payment models are going to be figured out. That is a really hard nut to crack for a lot of our small, medium enterprises, even our larger ones, that they don't know how data is acting, especially on the follow-up of patients. So we call it phase 5 of clinical trials, looking at the outcomes of what happens to the patients once you are compliant and so on. These touch points on data are crucial to innovative business models. And I think having an organization around that, giving them access, the companies access, and organized in a way where the public stakeholders also benefit from that would be a good thing to design.
Jenny, a quick comment on this? Yeah.
Yes, also on the clinical trials, of course, and the public-private partnerships, building national infrastructures in a regional system. We've done some of those really both on the high-end research side is SciLife Lab, which is really has a core part from Karolinska, but all the university hospitals around Sweden aligned with that. Also the genomic medicine Sweden infrastructure, all the university hospitals aligned, and that sort of also came throughout the life sciences strategies. So to find those, where do you build the national infrastructures that have sort of international excellence, that was our sort of starting point. So in medtech, that would sort of natural be sort of for Ireland, something to truly build on.
Mark, just on the question of clinical trials, I know you're literally wearing your EU hat, but you know, just taking that off for a moment, you served there as head of science foundation Ireland, chief science advisor to the government. In terms of clinical trials, we're punching well below our weight, aren't we? Here, I mean, are we paying a price for that? I mean,
so I think there are two things. First of all, I think we need to be realistic. Ireland is a small country, and there's only a small population, so you often need large populations in clinical trials, and we're not going to deliver that because we're not the UK or France or America or so on. But being focused and being well organized and being able to recruit patients quickly and being able to collaborate easily with other systems, whether they be within Europe or the UK, that's going to be part of the deal. And you already see that in Ireland. So, for example, the cancer trial people span north-south, and they also go to UK. And that's really important because if you're a company, you want to recruit patients as quickly as possible. You also want those patients in the spec that you have for your particular clinical trial, and you want very good clinicians who are administering them. So yeah, we need to brush up, but we also need to be realistic. You know, we're not going to be the UK or France or Germany because the population isn't big enough, but we need to be able to integrate with those, and we need to have good data systems. And there's a real prospect on both north-south and east-west basis for doing that. And clinical trials have become easier with AI and the interface with all the large data stuff. And it's going to become even more important with personalized medicine, because people will be saying not only do they want somebody with a particular disease, but they may want a particular genotype or a particular proteomic profile. So the more information people have, the better to be able to put them into the trial.
I think there was somebody down towards the back there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Suzanne from Sapphire Ireland. In regards to ethical innovation, how can we integrate the shift towards investing in the discovery of innovative animal-free methods such as AI and organ-on-a-chip methods, and in the Ireland's life science sector?
Okay, so sorry, your concern is the use of animal...
replacing animals in science research, and just the development of discovering innovative methods
that avoid the use of animal research. Okay, very good. Comment on that? Yes, yeah.
So one approach is, of course, the use of data, as you said yourself. And I think for us having a national strategy of how to use or have an infrastructure for secondary use of healthcare data has been a part of that strategy. Mm-hmm. It has not been to target animal tests in particular, but it has been targeted as the source for making it easier and faster to do the research. And I think having the user-driven data as the pool that I just call phase 5, looking at that in the European health data space strategy is going to be a driver for leaning into even bigger and larger or deeper data sets that is going to move in the right direction.
All right, okay. Are there any other comments from the floor? Somebody was asking me a little while back, Ken Nally was wondering what percentage of GDP is spent on life science research in the EU, in Ireland, in Denmark, and in Sweden. There you go, that puts you on the spot, doesn't it? Might have to get back to you on that, I think, is the question. Okay, let me just kind of for a final a couple of questions to our panel. Michael, you referred in your remarks at the outset to our infrastructural challenges. You specifically highlighted water. There are others. They're well known to everybody here in the room and listening in. How vital is it, whether it's in the life sciences sector or any other area of investment, that we really make some progress now tackling those deficits?
Look, I think they're fundamental in an economy, I suppose we're in some ways, like, we're victims of success here, because the success of our economy has such, like, our population has grown by 1 million over the last decade. It's put strain and stress on all of our carrying capacity. And we know as well as that, in order, like, these are multi-generational investments that, you don't turn on infrastructure in 12 months or 18 months. It has to be multi-generational. And I think that's very much recognized at the heart of government. The government are working very hard to respond to that. And I think what's very helpful is, you can look back at history and say, like, there's periods where we invest, there's periods where we don't, and we should have. That's all done. What we need to look to is the future, and having the 2 sovereign wealth funds, actually, that's going to be there to protect us for future investments for infrastructure. Because the future, let it be, it doesn't matter whether you're industry or whether we're looking at our personal lives and balanced regional development, that's going to require increased security in terms of our electricity supply, and the type of supply as well. So moving from, if you want to call it, brown to green, is going to be so critically important. The infrastructure in terms of water, we know we have an opportunity actually for the east coast of Ireland here, and it's so critically important that we move that forward in terms of water infrastructure and indeed wastewater infrastructure, not just for industry, but also to support our ambitions to grow as a population, because our population is going in one direction, and that's upwards.
And just, Mark, the potential for regional development here in life sciences, does it present a particular opportunity?
Well, you already see it. I mean, the west coast of Ireland is the kind of cluster for medical devices, and you're beginning to see real regional development. So I think the answer is yes. I think we also need to be realistic. You're not going to have it everywhere, but with today's environment and the technologies, then there are certain things that you need to do, like in a factory or elsewhere, but there's lots of things you can do in other places. So I think there's going to be more of that. I would say something very optimistic to finish with, and that is biology is not yet a predictive science, okay? So if you look at physics or you look at engineering, somebody builds a bridge, a building, very few of them fall down, okay, because it's a predictive science. Biology is not predictive. You can't predict certain things. We will get to a point sometime in the next 50 or 100 years where biology becomes more predictable. And when that happens, the whole game changes. And we're getting close to that with the application of both artificial intelligence, probably quantum computing to solve some of the things. And to give you a real live example of that, if you want to make something that protects you against snake bite, which we definitely don't need in Ireland because we don't have any snakes, but in other parts of the world, that's kind of important. It's a really difficult target because the proteins are very flat, okay? And they've defied any human making any drug that targets snake antivenom. Very recently, using simple AI, there are now drugs being developed that are antivenom drugs because the computing power is greater than the human power. So there's a huge opportunity in front of us. Like, you think about engineering, architecture. I know you used to be an architect. And that's all variants on a theme. Biology, there's still a vast frontier that's out there. So the future is very bright, but it's going to be different. It's going to be some of the same, but it's also going to be different. And convergence of big data, artificial intelligence, media systems, and traditional pharma, probably quite an interesting sweet spot for Ireland.
All right. Just a final comment, because Michael referred to moving from brown to green energy and energy security and so on. Jenny, in terms of the sustainability of our life sciences sector, what is happening, what needs to happen to ensure that that it's aligned with the green agenda?
Yeah, the green agenda has really been a game changer also for this industry, and I would say that's maybe not so well known, and that the life sciences strategy also could highlight that this sector is actually a driver for the green shift as a whole. So I think that this industry is very much in the head of the game and also wanting to be so. And I think that's sort of a huge industry commitment in Sweden for doing so, for investing in the green. But that's one part of the game. It's the whole healthcare system is a very very big polluter of carbon dioxide because it's so many people and it's so many things that needs to be done. So anything that we can do there, and I think that that's something that we pride ourselves on in Sweden. I think that we have the most actually the most greenest hospitals that there is, and that's something that we could also build on. So build in the green agenda in the life sciences strategy. That's a necessity also going forward.
Yeah. And Michael, and then Diana.
Yeah, I might just add to that, and I think it's important because it's a really valid point. And just to recognise the industry in particular have been at the forefront of the sustainable transition in Ireland, and in particular, maybe you just want to call out two things. Like, it's 10-15 years ago when one of the greatest clusters in Ireland for life sciences is in Cork, obviously, but you had the Lower Harrier Energy Group, which actually went and took wind turbines to power the facility. Like, they were 10-15 years ahead of them, people. So the industry has been doing that, and we've recognised, like, we have World Economic Forum recognition of lighthouse projects here in Ireland, and in fact J&J have two, one for digitalisation and the same site actually has it for sustainability. So the industry, I just want to comment on that. The industry has been a leader in terms of what it's doing in sustainability and digital agenda.
All right, there. So you can take a bow then, Diana, if you like. Yeah.
I would say there's still a lot to do in the industry, and I would say even though the front runners, the companies are great, doing a great job, it's still a hassle that the requirements in the public sector is not there. So if you are raising or putting in investments and then the procurement process do not honor it, what's the use? So really think of how you can drive again using the public procurement and putting new sets of rules here that you would want to lead into with these innovative companies. They're ready. It's required.
Well, I'll draw the proceedings to a close. It's absolutely been a fascinating conversation. I said at the outset that life sciences is a very broad area, and I think that's well illustrated by the discussion and the fact that we can probably go on talking for some time yet, but we will conclude now. I think we promised to wrap up by 2:30. So I'd like to thank on your behalf our panelists for being here, to Jenny, to Mark, to Diana, and to Michael for taking the time to be with us. And I'm sure you'd like to show your appreciation in the usual way.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.